Hello friends, my name is Sunil Ranjan and I'm an English faculty member. Well, now I have come up with a summary of the novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So here I begin. Charles Bingley is a bachelor. When he moves to Netherfield Estate, the neighborhood residents become very happy. Mrs. Bennet is delighted at the thought of marrying off one of her 5 daughters to him. When the Bennet daughters meet him at a local function, they are impressed by his outgoing and friendly personality. They are not impressed by his friend Darcy, an arrogant aristocrat who does not talk to locals and whom Elizabeth Bennet overhears refusing to dance with her. Bingley and Jane, the oldest Bennet daughter, soon get close to each other. Bingley's sisters oppose their relationship as they do not approve of Jane, their brother's wife, because of her mother's lower status. Darcy too does not approve as he believes that Jane is unresponsive to Bingley. Darcy finds himself attracted to Elizabeth Bennet despite his objections to her family. He is fascinated by her sharp sense of humor and deep expressive eyes. Even Caroline Bingley's jealous criticism of Elizabeth fails to lessen Darcy's admiration for her. Darcy begins to take more interest in Elizabeth, but she does not like him and develops fascination for George Wickham, a handsome army officer. Wickham tells Elizabeth that his father worked for Darcy's father and that he and Darcy grew up together. Wickham tells her that Darcy was selfish and disobeyed his father's inheritance of a clergyman's revenue to him. Wickham's story makes Darcy appear not only proud but cruel. Elizabeth believes Wickham without question and begins to dislike Darcy even more. In the midst of Jane and Elizabeth's developing relationship, the Bennet family is visited by Mr. Bennet's cousin William Collins, a clergyman who will inherit Mr. Bennet's estate legally when he dies. Feeling sorry and apologizing for the legal document and praising his patroness, Lady Catherine de Boroughs, Mr. Collins informs Mrs. Bennet that Lady Catherine has instructed him to marry and he plans to choose a wife from the Bennet daughters. He settles on Elizabeth but is stunned and offended when she refuses him. Then he turns his attention to Elizabeth's friend Charlotte Lucas, who wants to marry him not for love but for financial security. The two are soon engaged and married. Meanwhile, Jane is shocked to know that Bingley and the entire Netherfield party have unexpectedly left for London. Caroline Bingley writes to Jane that they do not intend to return. She indicates a possible match between Bingley and Darcy's sister, Georgiana, who is also in London. Jane quietly resigns herself to a life without Bingley, but Elizabeth is angry for her sister and suspects that Bingley's sisters and Darcy are trying to keep him away from Jane. Elizabeth visits Charlotte at her new home in Kent and meets Mr. Collins' patroness and Darcy's aunt, Lady Catherine de Boroughs, who is an arrogant woman who always interferes in other people's lives. Darcy also visits his aunt with his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam. Darcy confuses Elizabeth with his behavior. He seeks her company but hesitates. One day he proposes to her, but Elizabeth, who still believes Darcy to be responsible for Bingley's separation from Jane and for Wickham's misfortune, refuses him. The next day, Darcy gives her a letter explaining his role in influencing Bingley away from Jane and states the facts of Wickham's situation. Discovering Darcy innocent of wrongdoing, Elizabeth feels embarrassed to have been prejudiced against him. After she returns home, Elizabeth goes on a trip with her aunt and Uncle Gardiner to Derbyshire County. There she visits Darcy's estate of Pemberley. They meet Darcy there. To everyone's surprise, he treats them graciously. He meets Elizabeth at her inn, introduces her to his sister, and invites her to Pemberley for dinner. Darcy is still in love with Elizabeth. Elizabeth too develops soft corner for him. While they both continue in such a situation, Elizabeth receives 2 letters from Jane, through which she gets to know that Lydia has eloped with Wickham, causing Elizabeth and the Gardiners to leave for home immediately. Elizabeth fears that Lydia and the Bennet family are disgraced and that her newly discovered love for Darcy is hopeless. When Lydia is found, she and Wickham finally marry. After the wedding, Elizabeth discovers that Darcy had played the main role in managing the marriage and thus had saved the reputation of the other Bennet daughters. Bingley returns to Netherlands and asks Jane to marry him. Jane accepts. Mrs. Bennet had been a little irritated at Darcy's occasional presence. Elizabeth's happiness for her sister is uninterrupted. Elizabeth's happiness for her sister is interrupted by a visit from Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who has heard that Darcy and Elizabeth are engaged, but it is not so. She gives a speech to Elizabeth on the lack of judgment in such a match. She demands that Elizabeth promise not to accept any proposal from Darcy. Elizabeth refuses flatly. Then Lady Catherine instigates Darcy against Elizabeth by telling him that she is of disrespectful nature and blames him for getting engaged with her. The way Lady Catherine describes Elizabeth's response to her demands gives Darcy hope that Elizabeth has had a change of heart. He proposes to her again and Elizabeth happily accepts. Here the story ends. So this is the end of the summary of the novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And my dear friends, if you choose to subscribe to my channel, you will see a lot more on literature and you will enjoy watching and listening to them. Thank you.